Neo-Nazis. The opening of Saw 3D throws us right into a public spectacle where four neo-Nazis find themselves chained together in interconnected death traps. These aren't just random victims. The film makes sure we know exactly what kind of people they are. We see flashbacks of their hate crimes, their violent behavior, and their complete lack of remorse for the pain they've caused innocent people. The traps themselves are designed for maximum shock value. One is super glued to a car and has his skin ripped clean off. Another gets crushed by car tires and explosive metal goes flying everywhere. All the deaths are slow and painful. But here's the thing, while nobody's going to shed a tear for neo-Nazis, their deaths feel more like cartoon violence than real justice. And the next death on our list hits much closer to home, because sometimes the most deserved deaths come from the most personal betrayals. Timothy Young. Timothy was the drunk driver who killed Jeff Denlin's 8-year-old son Dylan in a car accident. His death in the rack might be one of the most brutal in the entire franchise. It all started when Timothy got behind the wheel drunk, slammed into Dylan, and then walked away with nothing more than a light sentence. He showed no genuine remorse, no understanding of the devastation he'd caused. Jeff finds Timothy strapped into a device called the rack, which slowly rotates his body while systematically breaking every bone. First, his arms snap with sickening cracks, then his legs, and finally his head twists until his neck breaks. Jeff has the power to save him by retrieving a key, but he has to choose between forgiveness and revenge.
Device is going to start twisting. There is a chance he might live, though, with your help.
The parallel between a destroyed childhood and a destroyed body creates perfect poetic justice. Timothy gets to experience a fraction of the agony he put the Denlon family through, and Jeff gets to decide whether mercy or justice wins out. But Timothy's death was just about one family's pain. The next victim's actions created something much worse: Cecil Adams. Cecil was a drug addict whose botched robbery attempt accidentally caused Jill Tuck's miscarriage, leading to the stillbirth of John Kramer's son Gideon. This single moment of carelessness literally created the Jigsaw Killer and every death that followed. Cecil was exactly what you'd expect from a desperate addict: reckless, selfish, and completely oblivious to how his actions affected other people. During a robbery at Jill's recovery clinic, he slammed a door right into her pregnant stomach, causing the miscarriage that would transform John Kramer from a civil engineer into a serial killer. John makes Cecil his first test subject, strapping him into a crude version of what would become the signature Jigsaw trap design. It's rough and direct, nothing like the elaborate contraptions that would come later. Cecil has to navigate through a maze of metal rods to reach freedom, but when he desperately lunges for the exit, he triggers the mechanism that drives multiple rods straight through his face. What makes this death so significant is that without Cecil's careless violence, none of the Saw movies would exist. Every victim who dies in a Jigsaw trap can trace their fate back to this one moment of thoughtless brutality. Cecil created Jigsaw, but our next victim profited from his work: Art Blank. Art was a criminal defense attorney who made his living helping dangerous people escape justice. He thought his legal expertise and silver tongue could talk him out of anything, even a Jigsaw trap. Art represents every sleazy lawyer who prioritizes winning over what's right. He spent his career getting violent criminals off on technicalities, helping them return to the streets to hurt more people. As long as he got paid, he didn't care about the victims left in his client's wake. Jigsaw forces Art to wear a device on his back that will sever his spine unless one of the detectives trapped with him dies first. True to form, Art immediately starts trying to manipulate everyone, using his legal training to convince the cops to kill each other so he can survive. He's wheeling and dealing right up until the moment Detective Rigg panics and shoots him when the trap mechanisms start going off. The irony is perfect. A man who spent his career helping people avoid consequences finally faces them himself. All his manipulation and legal maneuvering can't save him when the stakes are real. Art enabled crime for money, but our next victim made money by denying life itself: William Easton. William was a health insurance executive whose cost-cutting policies literally decided who lived and died based on profit margins. William denied coverage to people who desperately needed medical treatment, including John Kramer himself when he was seeking experimental cancer therapy. To William, these weren't people with families and dreams. They were just numbers that affected his company's bottom line. Jigsaw puts William through a series of tests that force him to make the same impossible choices his policies created for families. He has to decide which of his employees deserve to live and which should die, experiencing firsthand the weight of those decisions. In the end, he's strapped down and injected with hydrofluoric acid by the sister of a man who died because William denied his coverage. The acid burns through his stomach from the inside while he's helpless to stop it. He gets to feel the same powerlessness that his victims felt when they were denied the care that could have saved their lives. William's death was about systemic cruelty, but sometimes the cruelest deaths come from the simplest crimes. Paul Leahy. Paul was a man who had attempted suicide but survived, leading Jigsaw to believe he didn't appreciate the gift of life. John saw Paul's suicide attempt as the ultimate waste. Here was someone who had been given a second chance at life but still didn't value it. In John's twisted logic, Paul needed to earn his appreciation for existence through suffering. morning. Paul wakes up in a basement, trapped in a room with a maze of razor wire blocking the only exit. He has to crawl through the cutting metal to reach freedom before the door locks forever. The razor wire cuts him to ribbons as he crawls, and he eventually bleeds out just short of freedom. What makes it so brutal is the hope. He can see the exit. He knows escape is possible, but the pain of getting there literally kills him. Paul's trap was meant to teach appreciation for life, but our next victim learned that some games aren't meant to be fair. Seth Baxter. Seth was a convicted murderer who killed Detective Hoffman's sister and received a light sentence due to legal technicalities. Hoffman never got over the injustice of seeing his sister's killer back on the streets so quickly. So Hoffman designs a pendulum trap for Seth that's supposedly winnable if he follows the rules.
To avoid the pendulum, all you have to do is destroy the things that it killed.
Seth has to crush his own hands in a vise to stop a massive pendulum blade from swinging down and cutting him in half. Seth does exactly what he's told, screaming as he pulverizes his hands to stop the blade. But the trap was rigged from the beginning. Even after Seth destroys his hands, the pendulum keeps swinging and cuts him clean in half. The look of betrayal on his face is almost as brutal as the blade itself. While Seth deserved punishment for murder, his rigged trap showed that even those claiming to serve justice can be just as corrupt as the criminals they're hunting. But the next victim embodied police corruption, Angie Garza. Garza built her career on willful ignorance. Whenever internal affairs complaints came across her desk, whenever evidence of police brutality or planted evidence surfaced, she buried it to protect the department's image. She chose institutional loyalty over justice for the communities her officers were supposed to serve. Her trap takes place in the police department's archive room, surrounded by files from all the cases she helped cover up. Hot wax drips slowly toward her face while she's given a horrific choice: sever her own spinal cord with a bone saw to escape, or let the wax burn through her eyes and face, but can't complete the task before the wax covers her face and kills her. But let me just say how dumb this is. Like one of you guys mentioned on my last Saw video, the most painful deaths in Saw, if you sever your spinal cord there, you likely wouldn't even be able to breathe, leaving us with an unwinnable trap. Not cool. Garza enabled corruption from the top, but our next victim was corrupt from the bottom up, Brad Halloran. Brad was a detective whose career was built on framing innocent people and planting evidence to close cases. His death delivered the kind of justice that dirty cops rarely face in real life. Halloran destroyed innocent lives to pad his arrest record. He planted drugs on people who'd never touched them, coerced false confessions from suspects who had nothing to do with the crimes, and sent people to prison to advance his own career. To him, truth was just an obstacle to closing cases. The trap manipulates Halloran into exposing his own corruption. When the mechanisms activate, razor-sharp lasers shoot out from all directions, impaling him like a human pincushion. His head splits into many different pieces that fall apart in one of the most gruesome and painful deaths ever. Halloran trapped innocent people with false evidence, but our next victim trapped people in a much more literal way. Obi Tate. Obi played the role of concerned fellow victim in the house, but he was actually working for Jigsaw the whole time. He helped abduct every person trapped in that building, delivering them to their personal hell while pretending to be just as scared and confused as everyone else. When the group needs someone to crawl into a furnace to retrieve antidotes, Obi volunteers, supposedly being heroic, but the moment he's inside, the door slams shut and locks behind him. The temperature starts rising immediately, and he realizes he's been played by his own employer. He pounds on the furnace door as the heat builds, experiencing the same panic and desperation that he helped create for his victims. The metal gets so hot, it starts cooking him alive, and he dies screaming for help that never comes. Obi helped create other people's nightmares, but our next victim created nightmares of a much more personal nature: Ivan Lansness. Ivan was a predator who turned what should have been a safe space into a hunting ground. He used his access to room keys to assault unconscious women, destroying their sense of safety and trust. The trap gives him a choice that's really no choice at all. He can blind himself with the sharp implements provided, supposedly as penance for his crimes, or face the alternative. When he hesitates too long, the mechanism activates and begins systematically tearing his limbs from his body. All 4 of his arms and legs are ripped off by the machine while he's still conscious and screaming. The dismemberment is designed to mirror how he tore apart his victims' lives and sense of security. Ivan's victims never got justice until Jigsaw stepped in, but the most deserved death in Saw history involves the most personal betrayal: Mitch. Mitch was a motorcycle salesman who knowingly sold a defective bike that killed John Kramer's nephew. Mitch knew the motorcycle had faulty brakes, but he sold it anyway because he needed the commission. He didn't care that someone could die, he just wanted the money. When John's nephew crashed and died because of those defective brakes, it devastated John and contributed to his transformation into Jigsaw. The trap is pure poetic justice. Mitch is strapped upside down over a series of spinning saw blades that are powered by the exact same motorcycle he sold. The defective bike that killed John's nephew becomes both judge judge and executioner, with Mitch suspended just out of reach of the key that could save him. As the motorcycle revs and the blades spin faster, Mitch stretches desperately for the key but can't quite reach it. The blades slowly rise toward his face while the engine noise grows louder, creating a perfect crescendo of mechanical vengeance. The motorcycle that killed John's nephew became Mitch's executioner, and that's why this death stands above all others in the Saw franchise. If you enjoyed this video, you'll love this video about the most brutal Saw traps that'll make you never want to do anything wrong again.
Mark Wilson. Mark thought his biggest problem was finding the right number, but he forgot about the gel covering his skin. Mark Wilson was a complete fraud. This guy actually faked having terminal cancer just to scam his health insurance company. He pretended to be dying, went to fake doctor appointments, and even shaved his head to look sick. Also, he could steal thousands of dollars from people who were trying to help real cancer patients. Jigsaw saw Mark as someone who didn't value honesty or life. Mark woke up in total darkness with his entire body covered in flammable gel. The walls around him were covered with hundreds of numbers, and only one of them was the code to a safe that could save his life. But there were so many fake numbers that guessing was basically impossible. His only light source was a tiny candle, but using it meant risking his life because of the gel on his skin. Plus, the floor was covered in broken glass that cut his feet with every step. Mark tried to stay calm and search carefully, but panic took over. As he moved around with the candle, he got too close to his gel-covered skin and instantly burst into flames. He died screaming and burning alive, thrashing around the room until everything went quiet. But Mark's fiery death is nothing compared to the man who turned a house full of people into his personal hunting ground. Xavier Chavez. Xavier Chavez had everyone's escape code right in front of him, but his violence made him miss the obvious solution. Xavier Chavez wasn't just any drug dealer. This guy was known for using extreme violence to get what he wanted. He beat people up, threatened their families, and didn't care who got hurt as long as he made money. When he ended up in Jigsaw's nerve gas house with 7 other people, he saw it as just another chance to bully his way out. Jigsaw gave him a test to see if he could work with others instead of hurting them. Everyone in the house was breathing deadly nerve gas that would kill them in a few hours. The only way to survive was to find antidotes hidden throughout the rooms and work together. But Xavier immediately started threatening and hitting people. When he discovered that numbers on everyone's necks were part of the escape code, instead of asking nicely, he began murdering people just to read their numbers. He killed multiple innocent people, including a young woman named Laura. In the final room, Xavier cornered Daniel Matthews and was ready to kill him too, but Daniel fought back and slashed Xavier's throat with a hacksaw. Xavier bled out on the floor, choking on his own blood and the consequences of his violence. But Xavier's throat slash looks quick and painless compared to what happened to this corrupt cop who couldn't handle 60 seconds of pain. Michael Marks. Michael Marks had a scalpel, a mirror, and 60 seconds, but one thing stopped him from saving his life. Michael Marks was supposed to be helping the police, but he was actually making everything worse. As a police informant, he was working with a corrupt detective to frame innocent people for crimes they didn't commit. Michael would lie in court and help send good people to prison just so the real criminals could go free. He was destroying lives and didn't care, as long as he got paid. Michael woke up strapped to a chair with a metal contraption locked around his neck and jaw called the Venus flytrap. A timer showed 60 seconds, and Jigsaw's voice explained the rules. If Michael wanted to live, he had to cut out his own eye with a scalpel because the key was hidden behind his eyeball.
Listen carefully. The hint is this.
There was a mirror in front of him, so he could see exactly what he was doing. The trap would slam shut and drive spikes through his skull if he didn't finish in time. Michael picked up the scalpel and tried to cut into his eye socket, but he couldn't go deep enough. The thought of digging into his own eyeball was too horrifying. Time ran out, and the trap snapped closed, driving metal spikes through his head and killing him instantly. But Michael only had to cut one eye, while this next guy had to rip metal hooks out of 11 different parts of his body. Troy pulled out 10 hooks from his body, but the 11th one in his jaw would decide everything. Troy was the definition of a career criminal. This guy had been in and out of prison his whole life and never learned his lesson. Every time he got released, he went right back to stealing, hurting people, and breaking the law. He never appreciated his freedom or the second chances he kept getting. Jigsaw saw Troy as someone who wasted every opportunity to change his life. Troy woke up in an abandoned classroom with 11 thick metal chains hooked deep into his flesh. Each hook was driven through different parts of his body, including his arms, legs, shoulders, chest, and one particularly brutal hook through his lower jaw. A tape recorder explained that he had to rip every single hook out of his body before a nail bomb exploded and killed him. The hooks were embedded so deep that pulling them out would tear away chunks of skin, muscle, and tissue. Troy screamed in agony as he pulled out hook after hook, leaving bloody wounds all over his body. Even though he managed to remove all 11 hooks, the door had been welded shut by Amanda, making the trap impossible to survive. The bomb exploded anyway, killing him instantly, but at least Troy's death was quick, unlike this woman who slowly froze solid while someone watched her die. Danica Scott begged for help as ice formed on her face, but Jeff had to decide if she deserved deserved to live. Danica Scott witnessed something horrible years earlier. She saw a drunk driver hit and kill a little boy, and she was the only person who could testify against the killer in court. But when it came time to do the right thing, Danica ran away. She was too scared to get involved and didn't want the hassle. Because she refused to testify, the child killer went free and never faced justice for what he did. Danica woke up completely naked in a walk-in freezer with her hands chained above her head and her feet frozen to the floor. She couldn't move or cover herself at all. Pipes above her started spraying freezing cold water all over her body, making the temperature even worse. Outside the freezer, Jeff Denlon, the father of the dead boy, had the key to save her but had to reach through frozen metal bars to get it. Danica's skin turned blue and ice began forming on her face and body as she screamed for help. Jeff hesitated too long, torn between saving her and letting her suffer like his son did. By the time he decided to help, Danica had frozen completely solid with her mouth still open mid-scream. But freezing to death seems peaceful compared to what happened to this abusive husband, who was literally impaled with his wife, Rex. Morgan had to choose between saving herself or letting her abusive husband live. Rex was the worst kind of husband and father imaginable. He physically and emotionally abused both his wife, Morgan, and their young daughter for years. Their house wasn't a home. It was a prison where everyone lived in constant fear of Rex's violent outbursts. He controlled every aspect of their lives through intimidation and pain. Jigsaw believed Rex had caused so much long-term suffering that he deserved to experience it himself. Rex woke up impaled back-to-back with his wife Morgan by 8 large metal spikes that went completely through both their bodies. They were both bleeding heavily, but Morgan was positioned so she could potentially survive if she acted quickly. A tape explained that to escape, Morgan had to pull each spike out one by one, but every spike she removed would rip through Rex's organs and arteries, causing him to bleed to death. Morgan was terrified and crying, but slowly began pulling out the spikes to save herself. With each spike removed, Rex screamed in agony as it tore through his internal organs. By the time Morgan pulled out the final spike, Rex had bled to death from his wounds. But Rex died relatively quickly, while this next woman's scalp was slowly ripped apart by spinning gears. Brenda was seconds from freedom when she made one fatal mistake. Brenda looked like a sweet, caring woman on the outside, but she was actually a pimp who exploited young women for money. She would act like she wanted to help vulnerable girls, then trap them in horrible situations and force them to work for her. Brenda was a master manipulator who used fake kindness to hide her cruelty. Jigsaw saw her as a wolf in sheep's clothing who needed to be exposed. Brenda woke up tied to a salon-style chair, with her hair woven through a series of spinning mechanical gears. Her arms and legs were strapped down so she couldn't move. The machine was designed to slowly rip her scalp off, unless she could grab 2 handles positioned far apart and hold them down. As the timer counted down, the gears started turning, and her scalp began to tear, causing blood to run down her face. Detective Rigg burst into the room and freed Brenda from the chair, saving her life. But instead of thanking him, Brenda immediately grabbed a hidden knife and tried to kill Rigg. In the struggle, she was stabbed and died from her wounds, her true evil nature finally revealed. But Brenda's betrayal is nothing compared to this city official who literally used dead bodies to escape her trap. Luba Gibbs. Luba Gibbs thought she could sacrifice Malik to save herself, but her plan backfired in the worst way. Luba Gibbs held an important position as a city planner, but she used that power for personal gain instead of public safety. She took bribes from developers to approve unsafe buildings that didn't meet safety codes. One of her corrupt decisions led to a deadly apartment fire that killed 8 innocent people, including children. She knew the building was dangerous, but approved it anyway because someone paid her off. Luba ended up in the Fatal 5 game with 4 other people connected to the same arson case. In the final electrical room, only 3 people remained: Luba, Malik, and Britt. The room had 5 metal bathtubs filled with water and electrical wires. To open the exit door, someone had to complete the electrical circuit by sitting in the water and getting electrocuted to death. Instead of volunteering or working together, Luba tried to murder Malik by forcing him into the water, but Britt stabbed Luba in the neck with a sharp piece of metal. After Luba died, Malik and Britt used her corpse to complete the electrical circuit and escape. But using a dead body as a conductor seems almost respectful compared to what this loan shark had to do to his own stomach. Eddie thought his size gave him an advantage, but Simone had a much better strategy. Eddie was a loan shark who specifically targeted people during their worst moments in life. When someone was desperate for money to pay medical bills or rent, Eddie would offer to help them, but his interest rates were so high that people could never pay him back, and he would end up taking their homes, cars, and everything they owned. He destroyed entire families and didn't care as long as he made money from their suffering. Eddie woke up chained in a room across from a woman named Simone, both strapped to machines connected to a large scale. Jigsaw's voice explained the rules. Whoever puts more flesh on their side of the scale survives, while the loser gets killed by a machine that drills through their skull. They each had a knife and 60 seconds to cut flesh from their own bodies and throw it onto the scale. Eddie started slicing chunks of flesh from his stomach, screaming in pain as blood poured everywhere. But Simone shocked everyone by cutting off her entire arm with a cleaver in one swift motion. The scale tipped in her favor, and 2 large screws drilled through Eddie's temples, spinning rapidly until he was dead. But cutting off flesh is child's play compared to this fake nurse who had to extract her own bone marrow. Valentina cut off her own leg and started the machine, but time was running running out faster than she expected. Valentina worked at a fake cancer clinic that specifically targeted dying patients. She pretended to be a caring nurse while actually being part of a cruel scam operation. They would take money from real cancer patients and their families, promising miracle treatments that didn't exist. These people were spending their life savings on false hope while getting sicker and sicker. Many patients died because they chose the fake clinic over real medical treatment. Valentina woke up strapped to a large mechanical chair with her right leg locked in a metal device. A screen showed a timer counting down, and the instructions were brutal.
Dotted line on your leg marks the spot.
She had to cut off her own leg with a bone saw, then use a machine to extract enough bone marrow to fill a tank before time ran out. She had medical tools, including a saw, clamps to stop bleeding, and a device to operate the marrow extraction pump. Valentina screamed as she cut through her leg with the bone saw, then shoved the exposed bone into the extraction machine. The marrow pumped slowly into the tank, but not fast enough. A wire descended from above and wrapped around her neck, slicing through it like a blade and decapitating her before she could finish. But at least Valentina's death was somewhat quick, unlike this baby killer who made one wrong move and paid the ultimate price. Anna thought she found the perfect weapon to kill Ryan, but Jigsaw had one final trick. Anna appeared to be a sweet, innocent woman, but she was hiding the darkest secret imaginable. Years earlier, she had murdered her own baby by smothering the child to death. Then, she lied to everyone and blamed her husband for the killing. Her husband was so devastated by the false accusation that he killed himself out of guilt and grief. Anna let everyone believe she was the victim, while she was actually a child killer and manipulator. In the barn game, Anna was trapped with several other people who had to work together to survive. In the final room, she and a man named Ryan found a loaded shotgun hanging from the ceiling on a string. A tape played the message, "One shell, one shot can save 2 lives." But instead of thinking about what this meant, Anna immediately decided to kill Ryan and escape alone.
He wants me to kill you.
Anna grabbed the shotgun and pulled the string to fire it at Ryan, but Jigsaw had reversed the barrel, so when she fired, the gun exploded backward and blew her head completely off. Her blood splattered the walls, and ironically, the key to both their chains was hidden inside the shotgun shell. But Anna's instant death looks merciful compared to this corrupt cop who had to watch his fingers get ripped off one by one. Detective Fitch had to lose all 10 fingers to live, but the rising water had other plans. Detective Peter Fitch was everything wrong with police corruption. During a routine traffic stop, an unarmed man made a sarcastic comment that hurt Fitch's ego. Instead of staying professional, Fitch pulled his gun and shot the man dead in cold blood. Then he worked with other corrupt cops to cover up the murder and make it look justified. He went on with his life like nothing happened, never facing consequences for killing an innocent person. The new Jigsaw copycat chose Fitch for a brutal lesson in justice. Fitch woke up handcuffed in a bathtub that was slowly filling with water. His 10 fingers were locked into small metal devices, and a mouthpiece was positioned near his face. The rules were simple but horrifying. Bite down on the mouthpiece to activate the machine that would rip off all 10 fingers one by one. If he didn't finish before the tub filled completely, electric wires would drop in and fry him alive. Fitch started biting down, and the machine began ripping off his fingers with sickening snaps. He screamed in agony but couldn't finish fast enough. The water rose to the top, the electric wires dropped in, and powerful electricity coursed through his body until he was dead, floating in bloody water. If you enjoyed this video and want to see every secret in Saw movies, click the video on the screen.